All right, well, many Australian workers are doing more with less. We're doing more work hours, more hours with less sleep and less holidays.
Are you talking about yourself? Well, one career expert believes that these bad habits are actually holding us back. For some tips and advice on how to avoid career mistakes, we're joined by Michelle Gibbings. She's the founder of Change Meridian. Michelle, good morning.
Hello, Nick. How are you?
I'm great, thanks. Well, look, let's get straight into it. What are some of the key mistakes? Number one, we've got never taking more than a week's leave at a time. And I must say, I was definitely guilty of this for many years, and you just don't seem very refreshed, do you?
Absolutely, because what happens when you're working in an environment that's fast-paced, it's constantly changing and highly stressed, which is most work environments these days. If you're only taking a week off at a time, it's not enough to be able to really unwind, to relax and to reflect. And it's in the space of the reflection that you get that time to recharge and really look at, where am I now and where do I want to get to? And so really planning your holidays, making the most of them, and at least, in a 12-month period, making sure you get at least 2 weeks consecutive is important.
I suppose some people, and I think I was in this boat myself when I was starting out, I was afraid to ask for too much leave because I'd be sort of seen as being a bit lazy. Do you think that's part of it?
People worry also that there's so much change in a workplace. They worry that if they're away from the workplace for too long, they're going to miss out on something or they'll be forgotten in some way. And so it's about planning it. You don't want to spring it on your boss at the last minute, but give them advance notice. And sometimes if you want to take extended leave, you might even give them 2 or 3 years notice that you want to take 6 or 8 weeks leave, because sometimes you can bank up holidays. So plan it, but also recognise that when you're on leave, be on leave, and that means do the digital detox. Don't take your laptop, to the extent that you can have your mobile phone and the emails turned off. Really unwind, because often what happens is people are on holidays but they're still working, and so they're not taking the time to really look after themselves and also spend time with their loved ones and their family.
Yeah, I think we're all guilty of that. Okay, number two, never getting bored. Why is this one of the big mistakes people make?
Look, this might seem like an odd one, but what happens when we're so busy, we're rushing, we're running from meeting to meeting, we're constantly doing things, we never take the time to stop, to breathe, but also to think. It's when you're bored, it's in that space that your brain has the time to slow down, to think about things differently, to daydream about stuff. And it's in those moments that you actually have your best ideas. So if you are constantly rushing, constantly busy and constantly stressed, you're not at your best and you're not actually using the part of your brain that helps you think and really solve problems.
Well, speaking of rushing, mistake number 3 is being late for meetings. And again, I'm guilty of this. I was late to the news breakfast meeting just yesterday. So why is that such an issue in the workplace?
I think the biggest thing about being late for meetings is the message it sends to everybody else around you, because basically what you say when you're late is, my time is more valuable than yours because I can keep you waiting. And that's not a good reputation to have. And when you're late, it means you're missing out on things, but it also means that everybody else is then going to have to be late to catch up. And so having a reputation, really knowing what you stand for, and having as a marker of one of those reputations, I'm punctual, I'm on time, and I also deliver on time.
Okay, mistake number 4, making it too hard for yourself. What do you mean by that?
Well, if you go back sort of 10, 15 years, they used to have this acronym called a BHAG, the big, hairy, audacious goal. And the whole idea was you needed to have that really massive goal that you would then go out to achieve. But often, if we set the goal too high, if we make it too hard for ourselves, we don't achieve it. So I always say to people, it's good to have ambitious goals, but break it down. Break it down into those bite-sized pieces so you know what you can get done by when, and also so you constantly show progress. Because not only when you constantly show progress does it feel good for you, you get the little dopamine hit, but also it shows the people around you, it shows your boss, it shows colleagues that you're getting things done, that you're heading in the right direction, and that's important.
Okay, speaking of getting things done, there's always a temptation to cut down on sleep. But that's another one of the key mistakes you identify. Why is that so, I suppose, dangerous in the workplace to your career?
Well, it's dangerous to your career, it's also dangerous to your health, and all the research shows that. And if you look at the stats on the Australian population, it's something like 4 in 10 Australians don't get enough sleep. And if you don't get enough sleep, and the average person needs anywhere from 6 to 8 hours a night, you end up with the same level of cognitive impairment as if you're turning up to work drunk. And I don't know when it was a good idea that you turned up to work with alcohol impairment, but you actually don't function as effectively or as efficiently. You just don't have the same brain processing capacity. Now, there's always times with, life and children and things get in the way that you can have occasions where you don't get enough sleep. But there are also people who just don't structure their life in such a way that they prioritise sleep. And I always say, make sleep matter to you. It matters.
It sure does. Well, look, mistake number 6 is always multitasking. And I must admit, I don't know, I thought multitasking was a good skill in the workplace.
There are certain things that you can multitask, but usually it's when they're both really low-level transactional activities. So, for example, if you're at the gym and you're cycling, you can read a book at the same time. But if you want to do work that requires brain power, that requires thinking, multitasking doesn't help you, but also it makes you less productive. And the research shows that when you go from writing a report to answering the phone to talking to a colleague, what happens is what we call neural switching. Your brain is being forced to switch from task to task. And that means the primary piece of work that you were trying to get done, which might have been writing that report, it's going to take you anywhere from 25% to 30% longer to get it done. And so it becomes looking at your schedule and working out how you can plan your day in chunks of time, and ideally 30 to 60-minute blocks. Now, I've had people who've said to me before, Michelle, that just won't work for me. I can't say to my boss, when I'm just working on this, I've got to turn off my phone or turn off the emails. And I said, well, if you go to your boss and say, hey, I want to change the way I work, and if I do this, if I work in blocks and when I'm working on something, I'm just working on that, I'm going to be 30% more productive, your boss is pretty much going to say, hey, maybe we should give that a go.
And Michelle, I think you might be guilty of our last point because you've agreed to come in and talk to us on a Saturday. Number 7 is saying yes too often.
Well, I think my husband would probably agree with you on that one. Look, absolutely. I think the hardest thing is, once again, in a work environment, we're constantly told you've got to say yes to everything. Be judicious about what you say yes to. And that doesn't mean you just say a flat out no, but if someone's coming to you and asking you to do something that you don't have capacity to do, talk to them, find out what matters more and what is the priority. Because what you want to be able to do is, if you're saying yes to something, you want to be able to deliver and deliver well. And also it does sometimes mean that you're saying no also to other things in your life. So, everything in life is a trade-off, and you need to know what matters the most at this point in time, so I know what I can say yes to and what I can say no to.
Well, Michelle, we're very glad you said yes to us today. Thanks very much for your advice today.
Pleasure. Thanks, Nick.